Good evening, and welcome to the show. This is the First Amendment, historically speaking, and I will be your host, Frederick Douglass Dixon. Again, we would like to thank UPTV for allowing us to come before you and forward what we feel is necessary as esoteric information that we hope will find some way to enlighten and expose some of the very important issues and ideas that at sometimes are lessened, if not eliminated, through mainstream TV. So again, we thank all of the laborers. More specifically, I'd like to thank young Daniel, who's always a great help and indeed a good friend. So today, you all, when we begin to talk about Black History Month, as we have from the very beginning of Black History Month, we've spoken of some very important people, and we've talked about some very important topics and items and things that must be discussed. But today, it's perhaps the most important of them all, is in Black History Month. And that is a microcosm of what we want to look today as a macrocosm. And we want to pay the attention to the role of the Black woman historically, psychologically, and socially in America. And today, although a half an hour is not nearly sufficient, we will do our best to give a thought that is indeed hidden. And this will be so important for those young Black women who happen to be watching, for those of you all who are mothers, for those of you all who are grandmothers, and for those of you all who are indeed looking for a different thought than what you hear forwarded here on TV, on the radio, through the media, through education. Today will be a day that we look to you and prove to you your importance and your worth. And indeed, this will be transforming when we talk about the worth of the Black woman. So when we look directly to a scientific fact, and if it's proper, then we need to start at the beginning. The original man and woman are the African Asiatic Black man and woman of the planet, and from all others they come. That being scientific, and let me stop there. Science, that means that we can test, we can look to hypotheses, we can look to results over and over and over again and get the same answers from the same question. So scientifically speaking, science comes from the root word seal, which means to know. So if we are to look to something that we know, then one hydrogen, two oxygens, H2O. We talk scientifically and we talk about 196,940,000 square miles on the planet Earth. Scientific. The circumference, 24,896 miles, square miles. This is scientific. The diameter, 7,926 miles. This is scientific. It's been proven. There is 93 million miles from the Earth to the sun, and it rotates 1,037 1/3 degree per hour, which we never feel in some regards. But as a scientist would say, to prove this to you, then the last time you've jumped in the air, how long did you stay? So that is indeed tied to what we know as scientific. So to be scientific and to get it right, we need to first understand that the original man and woman is the Asiatic Black man and woman of the planet. So that being the case, when we look to the relationship of from whom all others come, then we have to look to the womb of the Black woman. Now we're talking about the start of civilization. How we know other people have gotten to be humans comes from this particular person. Now there is, for the Black young women who are listening right now, we will talk about your worth. And we want to go directly into it. What I want to talk about is how your value here in the wilderness of North America has been removed. How you are right now other than yourself. And how you, at this particular point in history, are looked to, and which will go down in the annals of history of what you were during this particular time, but to be what we call Scientific, we need to find out what happened before, what happened during, to make sure that we can understand what will happen in the near future. So we're back to this black woman being the queen of the universe, and the understanding of how the world is populated comes through her womb. So I want to be very clear when we talk about the worth of the black woman. The worth of the black woman was never in question in what we call the portion of the world of Africa, in an agrarian society, or what we call a society that was looked to as communal. There were certain traditional roles that the woman played. And any time, which follows us today, that you find a very successful or exceptional black man, and let's say, for lack of any other examples, the President of the United States, indeed a brilliant man, a constitutional law professor. But when we look to our President Barack Obama, our dear brother, and what science and history has forwarded us is that when you have someone that's successful, then 9 times out of 10, there is a woman who's far more attuned, far more intelligent, and a lot more aggressive and assertive than this man, which is his backbone, or as the Holy Book says, his rib or his help me. So that is indeed true. So to understand the worth of the value of the black woman in America, we have to look to how it's been removed. And let us, for the small time that we have, look to what Dr. Carter G. Woodson called the seat of trouble. And the seat of trouble is the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade, this particular person, this one particular person, this black woman, is removed from her original position as the multiplier of the earth. She's put into a subhuman position, as well as had the original man reduced or removed from his role as head of the household. So now she's in a frozen, independent state and head of the household. This is what we can look to as one of the major problems, or we go back scientifically to find the root of the problem. So God's love, or what we call the Most High's love for the black woman, equates her ability to be a co-creator of this particular population and the entire world. There is a connection there that has no other connection. No other group of people can claim this connection to Almighty God, that this particular woman would populate the earth and from all would come from her. There's not one other group of females that can claim that position. So your worth historically is what we call immaculate. So the connection that is natural, and if it's natural, it comes from higher than a mortal being. It equates this black woman's ability to populate the earth as we see it now. Literally, what you see in multicultural, what you see in diverse populations, all comes from one specific womb. Now, you can look to how the female, or more specifically, the black woman has been historically, when we talk about the nickname of the earth, we call it she. When we talk about certain things, we call it her. This indeed points to the worth of women, more specifically, the worth of the original woman, which cannot be denied. So I've heard a very wise man say, God does not give worthy things to unworthy people. Indeed, the black woman, from her original state, not what she is now, but her original state, her original being, is worthy of the highest degree of what we know civilization has come from because of what she's produced. So scientifically, she has produced all races. When we talk about scientifically, we want to make sure that we talk about the idea of relationships and the relationship between different groups of people. So we're talking about dominant and recessive genes. So the most dominant gene to produce humans comes from this particular black woman. No one else on the planet scientifically has this power. So to get to where she is now, we look to the transatlantic slave trade. We look to the slave master relationship. And what was that like? The slave master relationship was indeed wicked. It was indeed a relationship that was one-sided to the point where the best of this black woman and what she had already produced, what she was taught to produce, what she would naturally render, was absorbed, and then she was put in a position of being subhuman. Well, if she's subhuman, then why do we have so many black women who during that time had children with their slave masters? This in turn removes the idea of being subhuman, because there's some kind of relationship that white men are attracted to black women in such a way. And I think the slave master relationship gives its totality, but there are also very intriguing portions of that totality. One being the attraction to what we know is a higher being or a higher connection to a higher individual than this particular white woman. Without question, when we look at the original science, there is no question where this particular group came from. So the dominant recessive white gene cannot, well, the recessive gene cannot make the yellow population, or what we call our Asian population. And that Asian population, dominant recessive, can't make what we call the particular original or the indigenous people of this land. And that red population, as we call them, that dominant and recessive gene cannot provide the proclivity to produce the brown population, our Latino brothers and sisters. But when it comes to that black man, out of all others, when it comes to that black man, he is the producer of all. And for something that you young ladies can do, you can get yourself a set of crayons, you can get yourself a set of paints of all colors. Get every shape you can and put them all together and stir them up. And when you're done, tell me what color you came up with. Obviously, you're going to come up with black. So when we say triple black, we mean as black as 10 million midnights. And then the ability to produce scientifically something that's 180 degrees different, an albino that is whiter than the whitest European person. That in turn connects you to the ability and your connection to God to repopulate the planet. This is indeed scientific as we speak. And the problem after the transatlantic slave trade was already done. To remove the black man from head of the household and place this black woman in head of the household, we see it today. We see it today when they say the majority of the college graduates over all other populations increasingly has been black women. Indeed, this is a vestige. This is something that came directly from the training of the transatlantic slave trade, that without the black man, this woman can stand alone. She has done it. The black woman has stood alone for so very long that it seems to be natural. Let me explain to you, incorrect. You are going absolutely nowhere without the black man, and the black man is going absolutely nowhere without you. A wise man said, a nation can rise no higher than its woman. He also said, where you find no decent women, you will find no decent men. We are attuned enough to understand that the old saying says, when we were acting out, as a young man, I acted out a lot. And one of the terms that my grandmother, my aunts, my mother, and those women around me who were charged with raising me, not alone, because I have indeed a great father who is still living today. Thank God he's a living man. They would say, what has gotten into you? So that's the question that we'll pose today. What has gotten into black women that has taken them from the original producer of the land and the producer of populations today to where they are now? Well, they say, what has gotten into you? Well, for the black woman today, what has gotten into you is what we consider to be your open enemy and the thoughts that he has produced to have you believe certain things are important for you. So one of them was to remove the idea of the relationship that you would have with black men. That is the most essential portion, to have you have hate for your mate. Now, this doesn't go one way. We are so injured here in the seeds that we produce that it becomes natural to want to say, and I've heard it so many times for a black woman to say, I don't need a man. I'm educated and I'm a good person. I think for the most part, you are absolutely correct. You are formally educated and you are a good person. But what did the formal education do to you? And furthermore, let me ask, you're a good person, but what are you good for? There was that same wise man that said, there is no such thing as a bad black woman, only what the black man has made her. I concur fully. When we allow our women to be used as objects, there's no other woman who has been disrespected, devalued, and put in a position of subjugation like the black woman here in America, and now it's global. So what is sacred should be valued, and what is valued should be protected. So when we talk about black women here in North America, we talk about the most devalued and unprotected group on the planet. There's not another group, ethnicity, individuals that have collectively looked to their women in such disrespect. There's not one that has less control over their women population than the black man here in America. What we mean by control? Well, that word will shake up a lot of you young ladies who I've already having think just a little different by some of the things we've already talked about. Indeed, without question, that word control comes into play. Well, I don't want anybody controlling me. Well, here we go back to that thought. Where did you get that from? What has gotten into you? How do we look at that today? That word control. Well, what is untethered cannot be controlled. So when we talk about control of the black woman, we talk about the idea of you having the connection to what is important. So as Bobby Wright said, a very brilliant man, he said, we suffer from menticide. Menticide is when some group has taken over or committed suicide on your mental portion of your life and replaced it with what we call a foreign object, and you look to your friend as an enemy and your enemy as a friend. It has completely been juxtaposed. That takes a brilliant scripture. It takes a brilliant amount of sacrifice. But here in the wilderness of North America, all blacks suffer from what we call histriosis, a psychosis or a sickness from our history here in North America. So we're talking specifically about what happened to the black woman, since we know the seat of trouble that we're using today is the transatlantic slave trade. How do we look to this group? Control does not ever mean to stifle, to keep you from your aspirations. Control means to keep you protected. Page 58 and 59 of the message to the black man in America, written by the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, says it. Respect, elevate, and protect the black woman. So how do we look today at what goes on with our young children and say, oh my God, what has gotten into them? Well, we know what's gotten into them. The television has gotten into them. How about those who dress our women, those who control the dress of our women, have literally stripped black women in front of the camera, have literally put the word B-I and you know the rest into their mouths, so now they say it to themselves, by themselves, even when they're alone with themselves, they use these words. There's not a connection to one black woman being a dog. This is such a very serious topic that what I'm forwarding to you is only the baseline. This is something that you can go and research, something you can start thinking about and talking about in your household. But there are far more people that are far wiser than me who have left far more critical thoughts on this issue. But the aim is to get you to think about it. The aim is to get you to talk about these things in the home, which will cause a change in your home, which will cause a change in society, which will cause a change in us being uplifted as a group of people. Yes, indeed, it starts small. And it's so important that you begin to talk to each other in different manners. So when I say dear sister and I say dear brother, and I use the word brother, B-R-O-T-H-E-R, that means you're my other self. That means it's a lot harder for me to be violent to my other self. It's a lot harder to me to be one who would sell drugs to my other self. What I want for myself, I want for my brother and my sister. There's not another group who doesn't think this way. So what has gotten into us? Why is it that we are, as black folks here in America, the only group that thinks differently, that when we want to, as a group of people, have information forwarded amongst ourselves, or have an all-male meeting, or have an all-female meeting and close the door, there will be some of us who will react naturally and say, you know what, that's not diverse. What has gotten into you? We know exactly what's gotten into you. Your want for material culture, your want for what they call bling bling, your want to be able to remove yourself from the mud of civilization individually and not collectively. There's a very crucial phrase that says, and I would like for you guys to master this, for what it's worth. It says, every Jew is responsible for every other Jew. Brilliant. But not only are that particular group saying that, you can see it in their actions, attitudes, and behavior. So what has gotten into the black man and woman, and now today as we speak, what has gotten into the black woman? So being other than yourself has been a tragedy. And we look seriously at those who have perpetrated this crime for profit. So when we look to the media and we look to those who control media, they profit from our ability to show up every night on the local news and talk about the violence that we perpetrate amongst each other. This is indeed a sickness. And the black woman has indeed been put at the head of this sickness, and we can see the cries every day. We can see everything that you go through. And being in a position as a black man, sometimes I feel powerless, but there's absolutely nothing about me that's powerless. I just so happen to be able to come in front of you today with the light of understanding, under the searchlight of truth, being unapologetic about what it is that we should teach our women. Far more protective of what we teach our women. Far more serious about their coming and goings and the knowledge that they'll get their hands on. So you are indeed the first teacher of civilization, the very first nurse of society. And now we're reduced to calling each other B's and H's. And we respond to it because it's never what people call you, only what you choose to answer to. So I say to my sisters, when we think about it very seriously, you are becoming and have become someone who has imitated their enemy. What do I say to this? I say it takes a plan. I say it takes a plot. I say it takes several conspirators to help pull this off. So now we need to look to those who are amongst us, black people who are the agents of self-destruction. We need to look to those who are the links to continued white superiority and what it is that they do. And they say all the time, well, I've been told all the time, that we should never argue in public, that we should never disagree in public. Well, I'm not one that buys into that. If it's something that what you are doing right now to this day that is causing mass destruction amongst our people, then you need to be silenced. You need to be called out first. And then you need to be put to test on what it is that you find important and what it is that you're doing. So just a few of the quotes that I want to use today. And I really enjoy this quote by Maria Stewart in 1833, who was a counterpart of David Walker. And she says, I would ask, is it blindness of mind or stupidity of soul or the want of education that has caused our men who are now 60 to 70 years of age to have never let their voices be heard or their hands be raised on account of their race? Or is it for the fear of offending whites, which we are taught since our earliest infancy? I say that to say to the black man, as you are complicit in this destruction of the black woman, you need to be held accountable. You need to atone, and you need to make sure that things in your mind that you are forcing upon this woman, that you're held accountable for this. Nation building, building nation. How do we go about this? We have to make sure that in all turns of life, we are respecting and protecting this black woman to our death. You haven't been taught that. What you've been taught is to use her. What you've been taught is sexual exploitation. What you've been taught is to put your hands on her in a different manner than love. So indeed, this is a critical and crucial point of our conversation. And again, 30 minutes will not get this. 30 hours won't get this. 30 years we have gone through way more transformation than it will allow. But to start, to leave a seed, I say that we as a group can look to absolutely no one else to change our circumstances. It's time out for us saying what white America has done for us. It's time for us to do for ourselves. It's time for us to stand up and make sure that our women are protected and respected. So we have to go through another training. We have to go through a rebirth. We have to go through what we know as, well, very similar to parenting classes. Some of these things have to be taught from the very smallest and the minute thought to the larger and grander scale. And I wanted to read something by Maya Angelou. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. We have to change our mindsets about each other, brothers and sisters. And for the youngest one who is watching, this young lady, we indeed love you. We indeed know your worth. And I will die for you to be successful. That means that perhaps my sacrifice will not be counted. Not my problem, and I'm not a damn fool. I am willing to die for future generations. And it starts with that youngest black woman. So indeed, black man, you are charged with your ability to change your thoughts. And it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. So now, as we have gotten to this point, we have talked about some very crucial issues. And some of you will find fault with me. I find no remorse in anything that I've said. And for you, as a black man or woman, to find fault in something that I said goes back to your ulcers, your sickness, and your history here in America called history ulcers. So black man, understand to protect and elevate the black woman. And for you young ladies who are looking for heroes, you have several heroes that are not on TV. And we will continue to forward these heroes to you. Ladies and gentlemen, this information may in no means change your mind, but because truth and you are so very important to me, I just thought you ought to know. I remain, with esteem and respect, a distinguished man of color, Frederick Douglass Dixon. Thank you. I would like to say a happy Savior's Day to each and all the believers. I look forward to the message that the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is going to forward. And again, happy Savior's Day.